first. Bore da, Ulrika, shwd
Very good, Mark. You're picking it up much quicker than I am, and you're all the way over in London. Bore da to you, and a very, very wet welcome, I'm afraid, to Portmeirion. But I think the setting, this rather stunning storybook setting, will make up for all the rain. And joining us this morning is the grandson of the creator of this fabulous village, Mr. Robin Llewellyn. Bore da.
Bore da.
Now, standing here, we could, in fact, be in the middle of Italy, really, couldn't we? What was the inspiration behind the village?
Well, Clough was inspired by travels in Italy, where he felt that the architecture of the landscape was fitting and enhanced the landscape. And he really, his idea here was to show that one could develop a naturally beautiful site without defiling it, and indeed that one could, with enough loving care, actually enhance what nature had given you as a background.
Now, he was also a bit of an environmentalist, really. I mean, he was ahead of conservationist, I should say. He was ahead of his time, wasn't he?
Yes, he was in the 20s and 30s when there were no such things as planning restrictions and urban developments and urban sprawl were really spoiling the countryside. He was very keen to show that one could develop a site without spoiling it, and that really, as a conservationist, he wanted to practice what he preached. And this is what he set about doing here. Of course, he also did it for fun and his own enjoyment as well.
Yes, I must say, it's tremendous to be standing here. It really is. It was built quite quickly as well. All the buildings were built in a short period of time.
Yes, well, he didn't start Portmeirion until he was 42 and in mid-career. And so, of course, at that time, he didn't realise that he would still be around at the age of 95 to put the finishing touches to the place. So he was in quite a hurry to get it finished. And a lot of these buildings are timber-framed with lath and plaster, and really...
Has it created a problem for you now?
Well, now our work is cut out really rebuilding each cottage one at a time over the course of every winter, and we're about halfway through, but there'll be no change to be seen because they're all exactly constructed exactly to look as they were before.
Yeah. Tell me briefly what he was like as a person. He seems like a bit of an eccentric.
Well, as you can see, he had quite a sense of humour, and he was really a very witty and humorous man, and very down to earth. He had his own uniform, which he had made for him because he couldn't really bother to think about what he was wearing every morning. So he had 6 sets of his yellow socks and knee breeches made, and this is what he wore from the 30s onwards.
And he also didn't really have a memory for names either, did he?
No, I mean, he could remember a building from his childhood. He could sketch it out in detail, exactly proportioned. But when it came to people, he sort of found that a bit difficult, and many people would come to Portmeirion regularly over the years, and he was showing one regular guest around and said, "Well, here, Mr.
And he'd always be forgetting names.
Well, that's right. He said, if only you had a facade instead of a face, I'd remember you instantly. I don't know.
A charming man, I'm sure. Robin, thanks so much for your time, and thank you for standing around in the rain, which is the recipe for the rest of the nation, I'm afraid. Cloud and rain. What a terrific June we're having. Isn't it splendid? Heavy shower. It is cold absolutely everywhere across Britain, and it's a little bit wet here, but it was bright when we first started off this morning, and I was crossing my fingers and hoping, but unfortunately it's turned a little bit overcast. But it's overcast everywhere else, so I suppose it doesn't matter. Yes, we're standing here in Portmeirion, and it has around 275,000 visitors each year. Some of them are familiar faces, some of them keep returning, no more so than our next guests, Mr. Peter and Elaine Carr. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
You're from Herefordshire, and you've been to Portmeirion several times. How many times have you been here?
Oh, must be more than 40 to 50 times.
Goodness, you must forget it, how many times you've been here.
Coming ever since our children were very small, and when they were in cots when we first came to the cottages, and they're now over 38 and 40 years old, so we've been coming many times.
Peter, why do you keep coming back?
Well, it's just a very special place. It's packed full of memories. And Portmeirion, well, it's not just the village, which is beautiful and which we love. It's the whole scenery. It's a marvellous Welsh estuary. Scenery unrivaled, really, anywhere in Britain. And then we've got the woods, beautiful, magnificent gardens, rhododendrons, exotic trees, 20 miles of footpaths even, leading down to unspoilt beaches for the lucky 10% who ever managed to find them. it's just a wonderful place for us.
What was your most enjoyable time, do you think, Elaine?
Well, last year we had the whole family here for our Ruby wedding, and that was marvellous. And the hotel management and staff were absolutely wonderful and made it a very memorable occasion for us.
And you also knew Sir Clough briefly as a guest. What was he like?
Oh, charming, charming old gentleman. Always willing to talk to the guests and tell them about his plans for the future and how he built the houses and all those sort of things. Great fun.
Well, that's lovely to hear. Peter and Elaine, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. Two very, very happy guests and visitors here to Portmeirion and the surrounding gardens. Well, I hope they'll still be coming despite the cloud and rain this morning. It's rather miserable throughout Britain, in fact, as you probably know.
Ulrika.
Good morning to you, Martin. It's raining down here, but behind me you see some beautiful buildings, which some of you might remember as the setting for a very, very famous and very well-known television series, namely The Prisoner. Horrendous and very, very frightening. Joining us this morning is Mr. Max Horer, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the series. You run the local prisoner shop, don't you?
Yes, it's the only prisoner shop as far as I know, yes.
Now, you're sitting in this mini-moke. What relevance has the mini-moke got to the series?
Right, the mini-moke was used as village taxi in the prisoner. They had 4 of these vehicles when they made the series in 1966. The inmates of the village in the prisoner could go anywhere they wanted as long as they didn't leave the village, so they were just the local service.
So why was the series so special? I mean, there was only 17 episodes ever made.
It was very much ahead of its time. It had looks forward to the future with technology, for example, surveillance cameras. Everywhere in the village, cameras were watching, microphones were listening. You were always being watched. These days, you'll see surveillance cameras around a lot. Another example, interesting quotations, for example, about being numbered. I see you've got a badge. I'm not a number, I'm a free man.
I know, I've got some rather interesting badges here. We'll perhaps talk about those a little bit later on. They're rather confusing. Now, it was way back in the 60s, and another series has not been made, but you've actually met the star of the programme, Patrick McGoohan. What was he like?
He was rather distant, but then McGoohan's a very private individual. He's a bit of a recluse these days. He's 63. He lives in America. He makes the occasional film and programme now and then, but he's a very difficult person to get to know well. And when I did meet him, he was very courteous, but he was very distant.
And he was prisoner number?
Well, of course, in the series, he's number 6.
Brilliant. Well, we'll be seeing you. Be seeing you just before 9. It's crazy. It's wild here and it's raining and I love it. It's cold as well. And that's what it's going to be like for this wonderful summer of ours in June.
Good morning to you.
Good morning to you. Oh, there's a peacock in the background making lots of loud noises. Yes, I'm standing here in Portmeirion, which was created as a dream by Sir Clough Williams-Ellis. And it's splendid to be here. Not just the buildings to see, of course, but the gardens. And in my hand here, in my fair hand, I'm holding some fantastic roddies, rhododendrons. And this one here, that one there, if you can see, is known as the Welsh dragon. Just thought I'd show you that because they smell fantastic. Anyway, I'm going to put those aside and tell you all about the weather. It's miserable, it's wet and it's cold in the southwest. Now, I'll be seeing you at about 9 o'clock when we'll be talking to Max Horer again about The Prisoner and all about the film. And, oh, it's very exciting. So back to you for the time being.
Ulrika, thanks very much. What's all this? I'll be seeing you. Is that from The Prisoner?
Well, apparently, of course, I must add that The Prisoner was shown the year I was born to make you feel a bit old.
Thank you very much. That makes me feel very
old.
old.
This is a little bit, this is supposed to be the shape of a 6, and apparently this was something they got up to.
Right. They'll all be doing it all over the country now. And tomorrow, where are you off to tomorrow? Wales this morning. Good morning to you.
Wherever I am, the rain comes. It stops when I stop, and it starts when I start. It's wild, and it's crazy, and it's cold. Joining us this morning again is our familiar friend Max Horer, who runs the shop. Oh! What is this horrible big round white thing?
Right, that's Rover. In The Prisoner, these balloons were used as the village guard. They bounded after people who were trying to escape from the village. They could smother them, they could even kill them, and they could sort of herd them back to the village. They were the village guardian.
They're quite a fine texture. I shouldn't be pinching it like that.
Of course, in reality, they burst very easily.
They must have had to use a few during the
They used over
filming.
100 when they made The Prisoner. But of course, in the series, these are simply a white, a sort of amorphous mass which sort of envelops people. Yeah.
Take it away there and let it envelop someone else. When was the last time the series was shown on television?
Yes, it's nearly 8 years ago now. Channel 4 rescreened it 1983-84, so it really is due for another run. Hopefully we'll be having a rescreening soon, we hope, yeah.
And as a Prisoner fanatic, would you like to see a brand new series made?
No, I think it's best left as it is. 17 episodes made in the 60s. It very much reflected the time, and as I say, it sort of looked forward to the future. But I think when you remake things, you tend to make a bit of a mess of them, so I think it's best left as it is, but it would be very nice to have a rescreening.
Which can be said for many feature films as well, can't it? Max, thanks so much for joining us this morning. You can take it. Oh, yes, what is it I've got to do? Be seeing you. You can take your little white thing and totter off, because it's time for the weather, and it's rotten. It's rotten all over the place. And in fact, due to this horrible low pressure that's affecting us at the moment,